but anybody who works in this industry has a certain level of being a masochist who likes a little pain and likes a little torture, or else why would you not just go work a 9 to 5, right? Things change, and having to be able to solve the problem and coming up with a creative solution. And I don't want to say getting off, but like getting excited about being able to figure something out that shouldn't have been able to get done.
You love figuring out puzzles.
Absolutely.
We live in a complex and ever-changing world, a place that is maybe harder than ever to successfully navigate. The answer is surely to be brave, but it's also to seek and be open to guidance. Mentors are the one consistent through line in the lives of all accomplished people, myself included. So welcome to Mentor Buffet, a feast for those, like me, curious about who helped the most successful among us succeed. A lot of you probably don't know this, but when you see a beautiful image in a movie or TV show, it has a lot to do with the lighting setup, and it can get very complicated. Nick Durr is a gaffer. He's the one who brings the light to set.
I've worked with Beyonce, I've worked with Kanye, I've worked with The Weeknd, I've worked with Diplo, I've worked with
Olivia Rodrigo.
Done a lot. I've done a few. I've done 3 Olivia Rodrigos. I've done Travis Scott.
Taylor Swift.
Done Taylor Swift.
Nick comes from a family of gaffers. His dad and his brother share the same craft. On this episode of Mentor Buffet, Nick shares about his family and how they've influenced his work and his career. Nick is a real friend of mine. This experience was really special. We discovered some stuff in real time, and I'm so excited for you to listen. Here's my conversation with Nick Durr.
I think most kids, especially boys, naturally look up to their dad as like, at some point in their life as, more than father figure in terms of like whether it be the person you look up to or a superhero in some sense. Like dad can do it all, right? And I still think this about my dad, even though he's now about to turn 65 this year. And like I'm starting to see, seeing him get a little more tired and starting to be a little more forgetful, but I still think my dad can do anything he really wants to do. And it's something I've kind of always looked up to him about, because anybody that I meet that knows my dad has always said that, whether it's in the industry or outside, anybody who knows him mentions the fact that he's like the nicest and kindest person and will willingly break his own back to help somebody else. I've seen him obviously do it with me, my brother, and my sister countless times because we're his kids, but it's something else to see him willingly do it for people that are not blood related, there's no financial gain on his end. There's no, it's just him willing to help somebody for the sake of helping somebody. You
grew up interacting with your dad in a way that is unique, right? You went to work with him.
He would take us to work, my brother and I, to work with him at times. And then there's also times where I wouldn't see him for a couple weeks, whether it's because he's working overnights or he goes out of town for work. But it's the nature of the business, I guess. So,
because your dad is doing what you do now, your dad, right?
My dad was doing, when I was growing up, my dad was working in the industry as a set lighting technician under a gaffer. Since then, he is now, in the past 10 years, been a rigging gaffer, which is somebody who supports the gaffer on long form shoots. He's responsible for going in and laying down all the power, putting in the order for, the bigger rigs, making sure things are there so that when production comes and the shooting team comes, they can come in and just start shooting without having to wait.
So what did you pick up back then?
That there's crafty on set and there's snacks forever as a kid. And it's like one of the things I always enjoyed was just like, what's on the table today and what can I take home with me?
Yes. Yeah. It is like a delight. It's a never ending delight of things that you would never buy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause your brother and your dad are some of the people that you saw doing this craft before you. Did you see them navigating some of the...
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think part of myself would get excited to hear them talking at dinner because they would talk about, when my brother was just a technician and transitioning into gaffing, he would talk about working for certain gaffers who my dad knew, has worked with and knew of. And just like hearing them talk and banter about like why they have to do things this way, and then so-and-so is just like that, and da-da-da. And it was exciting to me because it was like, in some ways, putting myself into a different world, a world that I didn't really know, but I heard enough about that I could stitch together what they were talking about. And so if you think of it in some ways, it was kind of like building my own story in my head of like, oh, what are they going to talk about today? Oh, he's still on that job, so he's going to bring up this, and like, stitching together little parts. And
it's like, it's almost like they were on the same same baseball team or like same high school or whatever, that you're like, I get it, it's high school, and they're coming home with all this like drama and gossip, and you can like hang on to the coattails of it.
Yeah.
It's really cool because you can actually connect with your dad and your brother in a way that like my dad is an engineer. I never understood literally any, like, nothing. I was like, he's doing something with cow poop gas, but like, I don't get it. Like, you know what I mean? So like, we never talked about his work actually, or very, very rarely. And so the only way I could connect with him was through sports.
I see.
And I think it's really magical to think about this like artistic, because it is art, right?
Yeah.
And so to think about this like artistic gossip as a way to connect with your dad and your brother is just very unique. You didn't immediately go into that world though, right? So in your mind, that you decided to go to college, right?
My mom kind of forced me I was the first to graduate in my immediate family from college.
You study marketing? I
studied marketing at Cal State Northridge. I was a super senior. It took me 5.5 years. But the first 4 years I kind of spent fooling around, used to smoke a lot of weed and go party all the time and didn't really care. I'd cruise by with C's. So I had to make up for that with a couple years. The first 2 years were a complete waste, and then had to spend the next 2 years fixing those grades so I could apply to the school. And then by the time I got accepted to CSUN for my last 2 years, year and a half, I ended up getting a scholarship and grants to cover my whole tuition at university, which was, exciting for me because it showed that if I did apply myself, I could do it, even though it was not a great school, but it was exciting for me to do something that my mom really wanted me to do.
And after school, you found this production team, you followed that path.
I fell into a production team with two friends who I used to hang out with, party, and play basketball with. Like, I did everything with these two. And I knew one of them wanted to shoot, and I knew the other one ended up going into editing. And so there was an opportunity that came up with one of our friends who was working at a beer company as like the VP of North America for Singha Beer. And there were these events going on, these beer festivals going on back in 2011, I think. They just first started happening. And we kind of talked with him and pitched the idea of like, hey, would you let us make a video for you? Just like essentially it was just a mash cut of the event of just people drinking beer, and, put it to a song and did that. And he was like, yeah, sure. We're not going to pay you, but you can come do it. And so we did that. And the three of us, Paul, Riz, and I, really enjoyed doing it. So we asked him to pitch us to the event coordinator to see if he would let us do a video for the entire event versus just for the brand. And he said yes. And he said, what? And we were hit with the question, how much is it going to cost? And we all were like, we have no idea. And I think we said something like $800 between three of us for like,
for like days of work.
For three of us going to the event and shooting, and then between three of us, doing selects and editing and then delivering. But we were excited because it was something that was ours, and we all were genuinely interested in what was happening. And fast forward concurrently while going to school, while I was transferring to CSUN, we were about within a year, we were getting flown to like Denver and getting flown to San Francisco and to go do these beer events and wine events because everybody would see our videos and say, oh, we want one of those too. And segue that into doing like real estate videos for internal use and doing videos for houses for real estate agents. And we were pretty profitable actually after the first year, and just kind of broke apart because as things tend to happen when you work with friends without clear roles for what everybody's supposed to do, everybody kind of feels like somebody's not doing enough, and it was kind of sad at the time because
how old are you?
At the time I was how am I now? 36 now. I was 25, 26, somewhere in there. And I think the exciting thing for me at the time was just, obviously, it was not just working with friends, but it was something that I treated as mine, something that I helped create and make and had, a certain amount of control and input into what the outcome was. And that I found exciting.
And that's something that you said a few times here, right? Like I've heard you talk about graduating, like being proud of that, having this company, being proud of that. And then you go and you work at the lamp.
Just didn't like the environment that I was working in because I felt like I was in a cubicle all day. Didn't really get to talk to anybody outside of the person in my cube with me. Had a 30-minute break and a couple 15-minute breaks to go outside. Like sitting under fluorescent lights all day isn't the most, rewarding thing at the end of the day. Pumping emails to people about buying lamps wasn't the most exciting thing. So I decided to quit that and go on a trip to Thailand and Australia with a few friends that we'd been planning for almost a year. And within a week of the six-week trip, the first week I got in an accident and broke my hand. Continued on the trip, but then when I got home, my mom, who always kind of would never allowed me to go work with my dad or work in the industry, just for what it's, the brutal hours and what it's done, what she's seen it do to my dad and my brother too. Didn't want to claim another one of her kids, and came back and she said, you need to go work with your dad because you need healthcare. It was the same time when Obamacare was unrolling, and so she was very concerned about me being taken care of in the sense. I think me being in Thailand when it happened was very scary for her. And I remember the moment I came out of surgery and I FaceTimed her, she was like, okay, so when are you coming back? And I was like, what do you mean coming back? I still have 5 more weeks on this trip. And I distinctly remember her I'm holding the phone and I just see her go, throws the phone to my dad, talk to your son. I can't deal with him right now. And it was, I think that's part of it too, that like she had time for it to marinate for another 5 weeks by the time I got home. And she was like, you're going to get healthcare. So
what does it mean for you to pave your own path in a career that you've seen growing up? You decide to dive into yourself. You're executing, helping support a vision of a director, but you yourself are an artist. You yourself are a technician. Let's get into that.
one of the nice things about having my dad as my direct supervisor is that I was able to ask questions like, why are we doing it this? Why don't we just go there?
Right.
And he would,
with the attitude of a kid,
with an attitude of his son. Absolutely. Because he's my dad. I didn't, in the beginning, I don't think I cloaked it enough to the sense of like, I would blatantly ask questions in front of everybody. And looking back, it may have came off as insubordinate, like, why are you questioning what's being asked you to do? You just do what's being asked.
But you learn.
But part of it was that it wasn't just that I didn't want to do what was being asked at all. I just wanted to understand why. Well, if we need to get there, why are we going all the way around here to get back here? And he would pull me aside and explain to me or say, I'll tell you later, just not because he's obviously busy doing other stuff. He doesn't have time to just always drop what he's doing to just explain to me, even though he would want to. And I would ask him again, like, so why did you do that? And he would say, well, we're doing this, but we're not here when they're shooting. And even though on the scout, they said they're never going to look this way. I know my job and I know what happens on set. Speaking for my dad, obviously.
Yeah.
And that they say, yeah, we're never going to look this way at all. It's all this way. And then they get there on the day and like, we're going to look this way. So for him, the way he's always explained to me is that for him to do his job right, he has to think ahead of what is being asked of him and plan so that if he has done his job right, that when they're shooting, no matter what happens, he's not the reason why production gets slowed down.
He's not the limiting factor.
Exactly.
And he's always thinking about what people don't realize they might want before they want it.
Exactly.
That's so interesting because I've been on sets where like you can't use the parts that you're talking about that were covered. And it is a little like, it breaks the world building.
It definitely does.
Every year I run the New York City Marathon. And when I go, I walk a lot. I will take the subway from my brother's apartment in Brooklyn into Manhattan, swing through the Met, get lunch at my favorite ramen spot, and then head to the expo to get my bib. And after the race, it's my tradition to go on a hike, even when I'm in the city. And this year I got to try out Merrell's new shoe, the Speedarc Surge Boa. This is a light hiking shoe that I wore all the way around Central Park, and it was really easy for me to go from soft to hard surface as I walked to meet my cousin for brunch on the Lower East Side. And the Boa lacing system is way easier than normal laces, especially for adjusting mid-hike. You literally twist it, and then when you want to release it, it just pops off, and then it loosens, which is really helpful. The dual density foam midsole makes the Speedarcs feel buoyant, which is one of my favorite words. And I love this matrix upper. It doesn't tear, which is really important. And basically these shoes are cute. Like I am going to wear them to my new movie premiere. And I literally got stopped on the streets in New York and at the Marathon Expo because people wanted to know, where did I get my shoes? I got them from Merrell, and you can too. Use code MentorBuffet25 for 25% off your first order at Merrell.com.
The scout is like the ideal world, almost. Like
it's the ideal world?
Yeah. In an ideal world, this is what would happen. Everything works this way. But more often than not, as you're probably aware, working on set is not an ideal world by any means.
But that is such a great thing to just accept, because if you think it is, then it's always going to be a letdown on the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, isn't that kind of a beautiful way to look at it? To be like, the scout is the ideal world. The real world is the world we live in.
The dream is this. The scout is the dream.
Yeah.
And you go into a scout and you always ask for the dream and try to get the dream. And then you get met with real physical constraints, whether they be monetary or schedule based or, sometimes location based or support, just time.
And does your joy as a gaffer come from like the distance you go? Like if there's a big challenge, you know what I mean? Is your joy coming from seeing yourself do something that was hard? Is it seeing the final, like where do you feel the most with your work?
In my personal opinion, I think anybody who works as a head of department, whether it be maybe, I think all the way up to director, But anybody who works in this industry has a certain level of being a masochist who likes a little pain and likes a little torture, because, or else why would you not just go work a 9 to 5, right? You enjoy, part of you enjoys the nuances of production, that things change, and then having to be able to solve the problem and coming up with a creative solution to meet the goal of what's being asked. And in some ways also being, I don't want to say getting off, but like getting excited about being able to figure something out that shouldn't have been able to get done.
You love figuring out puzzles.
Absolutely. Well, when I first started gaffing, when I fully committed to wanting to do it, I would take any job that said gaffer. It doesn't matter what the rate is, doesn't matter what the equipment is, if there's support. It says gaffer, I'm available, taking it.
And that's important, right?
I think in the beginning it's very important. It's important to get your foot in the door to start getting your name out there as a gaffer, but it's also important to show yourself that you have some grit and you can figure things out, because a lot of the problem solving and, coming up with solutions on the lower end are far more immediate and important in terms of how immediate it needs to happen, because you have less time, you have less support, you have less lights, everything is just on a smaller scale. So you have to be able to respond a lot faster, I think. And it kind of teaches you it taught me how to be more adaptive and less set in, it has to be like this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a way it should be done. There's a way it can be done. There's a way I would like it to be done. There's a way a DP wants it to be done. There's a way the producer wants it to be done. But ultimately, it's going to get done one way or another, right? So it doesn't matter. I can't be I'll try and think of the job as I'm talking about it. But there was a time when it came up to me and I was met with like basically a stone wall. And I was just like, why, what? I don't understand. I'm doing everything I can for this job. Why am I getting met with no
support?
Not support, but like give, in the sense of like, okay, you say you can't do this, so how about we do this instead? And then it's like, no. Okay, so we can't do that, so how about we do this? No. And it's like, why are you so, it seemed like on that job that producers were so determined to just not let something happen. And to me, the way I was brought up, because I came up under my dad mostly, is that you never say no. His job, the way he explained it to me, is to always, if a DP asks him for something or asks the gaffer for something, his job is not to say, no, we can't do it. His job is to say, yeah, I'll figure it out. It's something you're supposed to take the load off of the DP or the gaffer. In his sense, for me, it would be the DP. For him was the gaffer. So he doesn't have to worry about it. DP wants this, make sure it happens. And so coming up, leading into that project that I was talking about where I was met with a stone wall, to me, I always felt like, I'm doing everything I can. Why can't you help me a little bit?
Right. You're expecting that everybody has that same energy.
Exactly. And it's not the case. I would take any job that said gaffer, and even if it was just me and doing me in a sprinter van with lights and grip gear, me and a swing with lights, and me and just a key grip, I would do anything that just said gaffer. And leadership, when you have nobody under you, is very different, because you're essentially just riding yourself on how to do things and why you didn't do things the right way. But it also taught me how I needed things to be done for me to be comfortable with it. So when I did get people that I had already made the mistake, that I can then say, just do it this way. And if I have the time to explain, I would explain. But if I don't, just know that this is for the best, because I may know things that you don't know, and I just don't have time to share it at the moment. That
sounds just like what your dad was saying to you.
Which is very true. And, coming up as before I started gaffing, when I was just a technician. I spent time under my brother, and I also worked under a few bigger gaffers and also under other commercial gaffers. And I got to see how, anything from an old TV show that's been on for 13 seasons and they're set in their ways and the way they do things are the way they do things, all the way to newer gaffers who couldn't light themselves out of a box, or working with gaffers who are still to this day the biggest gaffers in Hollywood, and then also working with my brother. And going through these experiences as a technician, I also recognized what even before I knew I wanted to gaff or ended up gaffing, I saw what I liked and what I didn't like in a leader.
Tell me more.
I would sometimes deal with gaffers who wouldn't use headsets and would just turn their walkie on and say something, turn it off, and expect it to happen, which is like very old school way of doing it, that like you don't talk back on the walkie and you just say copy.
So basically they're closing off conversation.
It's a one way. It's one way. And you do what's asked and you do it and don't say anything. I didn't necessarily like it because I'm a very social person, and at times would even get in trouble on my brother's crew for talking too much, or I'm too loud, because I have a very loud, and my voice, I have a certain presence on set, I think, just because my voice is naturally loud. And I also like to goof around a little bit and have fun, because the way I see it is, why wouldn't you try to enjoy the time that you're spending on set as much as you can? Right. I know there's work that has to be done, but it's like, if you can do both, why not do both? You're spending so much time on set with people, sometimes upwards of 10 to 15 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. They become like a surrogate family in a sense. So why wouldn't you want to enjoy the time you have with them? And so that's something I always tried to implement in my own, within my own jobs as a head of department. And it's something I also got to see, and I learned partially from my brother too.
Did you notice that in him?
I did. I think that it's give and take in what I'm going to say, because he's my older brother and he's always been my older brother, will always be my older brother. And I know he absolutely wants the best for me. But me being a younger brother, at times I could see again that I was maybe being insubordinate or being a nuisance to him. Whether it be me being too close to where camera is about, they're preparing to shoot, or me openly asking things in front of people that maybe I shouldn't be asking. And even at times I had butted heads with him because of my tardiness and, showing up to being punctual when I show up at work. It's odd for me because my brother and I have always been close. Well, after high school, I think my brother and I have always been very close.
Before high school, who's close with their sibling?
Yeah,
my brother used to throw me against bookshelves.
That's part of it too. I used to practice.
Sorry.
He used to practice wrestling moves with me and his friends.
So you were his wrestling partner before 18. After you guys became...
I was a wrestling dummy.
Great, but after 18...
After 18, we... and like you said, I think it's just part of growing up with siblings, that when you're younger, until you get a certain age, you don't really want to spend time with your younger siblings. And it's understandable. But when I got into after high school and in college, we started spending more time together. We'd party together. We had some overlap of friends, and then I would go hang out with him and his friends at parties, and we'd go to Vegas, and we're the Super Durr brothers.
Super Durrs.
And we're always fun. We always willing to have a good time, always want to push to have a good time, and want to make sure everybody is also enjoying themselves too.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself, while working with him, was one of the greatest things. And one of the things I do miss too, because I don't get to work with him anymore, obviously, because you don't usually have two gaffers on the same set, even if there is a double up. You're not on set together.
Oh, wow. So you're not, right. So you've sort of graduated beyond this side by side.
Exactly. But while working for him, it was, I do miss it because I got to spend, it was like hanging out with my brother.
I'm really getting into that training mode lately. I'm ramping up my volume to the highest it's been in a really long time, but some things have evolved since I was training at a high level. For one, I feel like a completely different person, and also what I put in my body has evolved too. Momentous is one of my ways of taking recovery seriously. I go for the Momentous 3 because it has everything I need: protein, creatine, and omega-3. Expert research shows that most people don't get an adequate amount of any of these nutrients from their diet alone, even when you really eat the rainbow at every meal. So taking these daily will help your brain and your body on a cellular level. I put the protein in my smoothie when I'm moving fast. I got to turn it around quick a lot of these mornings between training and coming to the studio. And I also take the Momentous creatine. It helps with my focus and energy. The Momentous creatine uses Creapure, which is the purest creatine monohydrate available. In addition to recovery, creatine also helps me focus. All these Momentous products are rigorously tested, backed by science, and use the highest quality ingredients available. That means no gums, fillers, artificial flavors, or sweeteners. Head to livemomentous.com and use code MentorBuffet for 35% off your first subscription. That's code MentorBuffet at livemomentous.com for 35% off your first subscription. All right, guys, I've got something that you need to try, but first, have you been in the sun lately? Because I went to Mexico and I realized that the sun is amazing. And I got the first tan that I've gotten since like high school, and I feel so healthy. And I came back and I was like, how do I keep this feeling going? Because it's not sunny every day, even in LA, believe it or not. So I have been carrying around this little bevy from Peak. I wake up in the morning and I get this sun goddess matcha game on. I mix it with my milk, and then throughout the day I drink hydrating BT fountain. And the thing is that I feel like, look at me. I'm happy and I'm genuine. Like I really feel good. So thank you, Peak, for throwing me a little whimsy inside my skin cells. The Sun Goddess Matcha is bursting with skin-loving EGCG antioxidants to firm, brighten, and clarify. And the BT Fountain has a powerhouse blend of bioavailable minerals, clinically proven ceramides, and hyaluronic acid for deep-lasting hydration at every level. These Peak products are made with pure premium ingredients for maximum benefits you can feel. They come in pre-measured sachets, which make staying consistent simple. Just dissolve in hot or cold water. Y'all gotta tap in, and good luck. For a limited time, get 20% off for life and get a free starter kit, rechargeable, frother, and glass included with my exclusive link, peaklife.com/mentorbuffet. That's PIQUE life.com/mentorbuffet. Peak offers a 90-day money-back guarantee so you can try it risk-free. Try them today and thank me later.
I think the pace and the tone that he set, I like to think that with me was enjoyable for most of the people in the department, because me and him ourselves had a certain level of banter and would joke around, and that obviously spreads out to the crew too. And I hope that, he sees it the same way. And I think he does. And he's, obviously happy for where I'm at right now, but I know he's expressed to me before that it's not the same because we're not working together, and it probably will never be that way again. But it's something I carry with me, that I try to set on my own crew, that you can do the work and still enjoy the time and have fun, as long as you know where and when to do it. Like, obviously there's a certain level of banter and shit talking that happens on set and over our walkies within my own department and with my parallel department with the key grip and the grips. But it's knowing when and where to say it. You don't come on set while we're getting buried because of something happening. Look, whether, we have to pivot because makeup's going to take another so-and-so. So we got to go shoot this first. That's not the time to come in and talk shit and say like, oh man, would have really been great if we had 2 of those. It's like, not now.
Time and a place.
Exactly. Do it after.
What would it mean for you to tell your brother like what you just told me?
Maybe I haven't shared, and maybe he'll see on this, but I have shared, a similar sentiment that I obviously miss working with him and miss working with the guys on his crew, because when I got in, I worked almost a year and a half straight with my dad on his rigging crew and his guys. And then I moved into doing first unit. And after about half a year of doing that with other people, I got on my brother's crew, and I did that for 2 years, almost 2.5 years. And so I was working with those guys all the time. My brother has the same best boy, Frankie, same programmer, Tim Vanderlinden, same guys on the crew, Jesse Cruising, Dio Coward, just all guys I felt like I came up with, even though they were seniors to me, that I felt very close to and I still miss. And obviously my brother, of course, who's the head of the department, who sets the tone for everybody. And I think it's, at the time I maybe didn't recognize all the stuff that I put him through, because he was maybe being more demanding of me because I'm his brother and he expected more. But I may have felt that I was getting held to a higher standard than everybody else, or I didn't get away with as much, which is maybe why I subconsciously was insubordinate and showed up late and did things like that, because I was like, I know I'm as good as everybody else, but there's also a certain sense of hierarchy too, guys who have been with him for a longer time. And
there's this thing, there's just this way that you talk about like your own like behavior that's like, it's very interesting to me, because like it's like it's almost like you're saying it with gratitude more than like shame.
Me and him talk 3 to 5 times a week over the phone for anywhere from 15 to an hour and a half.
And you're busy. Is it on drives? When do you
It's usually on drives, or when one of us is on a pre-light or on a scout and the other one's a day off. Our schedules it's very hard to get our schedules to match, but we do our best to talk as much. And I do appreciate that and value that a lot, more so than I think I did before, where I used to think that it was him being, in some ways overbearing, or like trying to mold me or make me do certain things. But, I think in this last year, me and him have grown a lot from an event that happened where we didn't talk for about 7 months, which is 7-8 months last year, where I'm used to talking to him every other day for at least half hour. So it was very weird and very, I say this and I'm not sure if it's right, but it was freeing, but also isolating at the same time. So now that we're back to talking, I appreciate it a lot more. And I think, it's part of just growing up too, that I'm starting to recognize that, it's might have been my own pride. I ended up in an industry where my dad and my brother are both, my dad's very well known and very capable of his job, but well known for being kind and courteous and lovable and, the nicest guy. And then I have my brother, who's arguably one of the bigger gaffers in Hollywood right now, at least in terms of his notoriety. And, anybody you mentioned Danny Durr to in our industry in terms of under the camera department, whether it's DP or, other gaffers or key grips, know who my brother is. And I willingly jumped into doing that, going into the same field, and choosing to be a head of department as well, which in some ways I think I capped myself by allowing my pride to, say that I had something to prove versus, like it being him just trying to help and share and guide versus what I thought was stop, inhibit, and mold. It was more doing what I said to my guys and sharing what I knew I've already done, the mistakes I've already done, and my experience and why we're doing things is the same thing that he was trying to do for me. And I think I had trouble at the time just accepting it because he's my older brother and he's much further along in his career. But then, part of it, I have to take a step back and remind myself that he's been doing it longer. And I'm also in the position I'm in because of him and my dad. So
it's almost like you're seeing pride, the way you describe it, as like it was resistance before. Like because pride can be pride of your own whatever, but yours, the way you describe it, feels more resistant to whatever is trying to get in, but it seems to have evolved into like acceptance, right? Acceptance of whatever these gifts are or the realities are.
I think you're right, and I think that's what it's the form that it's in now is acceptance, and maybe has reverted back to its more natural state of pride in the sense of like being proud to be a part of something and to be where I'm at, versus what I may have felt before, which was prideful in the sense that I have something to prove, and my brother's this big gaffer, my dad's this big gaffer, I have to be this big gaffer. And like most people, when dealing with pride or ego, I think a lot of people feel like they have to do it on their own accord, and I think I struggled with part of it. I think I struggled with accepting that it was my brother who was guiding me versus, we're talking about mentors, right? And my brother's always been there and had my back, I think, since I can remember. And actually, we were talking earlier about when my dad and my brother were, when I saw them as like the first time I saw them as mentors, somebody I looked up to. And I remember the exact moment I started looking up to my brother was when I was 4.5, we were on a trip in Thailand, and we were all, me, my extended family, my dad and his 2 brothers and their kids, and my family and my grandparents were swimming in a river. And I was maybe swimming a little too far away from everybody else, and I slipped and went down the river, and there was nobody there. And the person who actually ended up going in to get me was my brother. And so in that moment, I remember feeling scared and unsure because I saw my dad and I was floating away, who I thought was Superman, right? And would save me. And I realized he wasn't going to be able to. And within the short 10, 15 seconds of whatever happened, I thought I was gone because I saw everybody yelling and screaming. And then my head went under the water and I came back up and my brother was holding me. And part of it is just coming to terms with accepting that it's okay to have somebody that close to be, your mentor and somebody to look up to.
Yeah. And in that story, he had you before you knew that he had you.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the reason why I struggled with accepting the fact that my brother might be arguably one of my biggest mentors, is because I felt like it was a requirement, maybe in my head, because he's my older brother, that he had to do this. Maybe he didn't want to, but he felt obligated.
Well, he had to save you in the river.
Well, yeah.
But he didn't have to do anything.
Maybe in some way the trauma in my head is, stuck with me because of that for some reason, that he did that, but he obviously had to do that because he's the older brother. And so maybe I felt like I didn't want to be a bother in some ways,
I think that's that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like that line makes perfect sense. And yet the reality is like so clearly slightly different than that, right? Because he doesn't actually, you're not drowning in a river anymore.
No.
And he's still there.
He saved me from drowning twice, actually.
Like literally?
Literally twice.
Okay, well, you're not drowning right now. What I meant is like there's nothing to fix. Sometimes we just have to observe things, and the observation is enough. That's what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's like
I think I've learned that from therapy. I mean, I think anybody who's experienced therapy knows that more often than not, the root of any trauma or figuring something out is always right in front of you. And then you're just like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
So.
Well, Nick, I so appreciate this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
We did it.
Thank you all.
If you're enjoying Mentor Buffet, follow Voicing Change for more inspirational and truly life-affirming content from shows like Soul Boom, The Proof, Feel Better, Live More, and the Rich Roll podcast. Just go to voicingchange.media. That's voicingchange.media for a beautiful selection of productive and positive shows.